Welcome, everyone. We will get started in a couple minutes. We just want to let some of those who are still joining actually hop on. Thank you again for joining the call. This is definitely more of a feedback and Q&A focused session, so definitely take advantage of the Q&A window. We have several people from our product engineering team on the back end that will be answering questions for you. Again, note that these questions are public by default. You do have the option to post anonymously, so just take an eye out for that one. The webinar is being recorded. We'll post it on the Microsoft Security YouTube. There is an Entra-specific playlist that's available at that AKA link, so aka.ms/Microsoft Entra videos. That's where all of our previous recordings are as well. It's a great trove of information, so definitely check it out if you haven't already been there. Obviously, be respectful. We want this to be an educational and fun call, so make sure that you're respectful, kind, ask questions, be honest. We want to hear it all, but just be respectful. We hope you enjoy the call. I'm going to hand it over to Brian and enjoy.
All righty, thank you. All right, hello everyone and welcome. Today we'll be covering upcoming changes to how we secure device identity on Apple devices with Microsoft Entra ID. My name is Brian Dalton Grace and I'm product manager for the Microsoft Identity Platform. I'm joined today by Olga Dalton, who leads engineering for identity platform libraries and SDKs for Apple devices, as well as Michael Epping, our customer experience product manager. So we got a great set of content today that we're excited to run through with you all. But before we do that, let's quickly level set on what today's content applies to. Okay, so today's content, as mentioned, is all about Apple devices. This includes Macs of all shapes and sizes, laptops, desktops, minis, as well as devices from Apple's mobile family of offerings. So this will include your iOS and iPad devices as well. All right, let's peek at our agenda. So we'll start today's discussion off with a brief introduction of a few concepts and technologies to lay a foundation so we can understand where we are today, what's changing, and why. We'll then touch on a few scenarios that we know will be affected by these changes, as well as what mitigations and options will be available to address them. Next, we'll take a look at our migration plan, so how to prepare for these upcoming changes and the timeline on which we might expect it. And then finally, we'll wrap up with a quick recap of what we've discussed today and switch gears into addressing any chat items or moderator questions that get raised. Okay, so let's start with device identity. Device identity is the central pillar of the Entra ID platform that allows us to, as its name implies, identify devices. And fundamentally, a device identity is an object in Entra ID similar to how users, groups, or applications are objects that give administrators information they can use when making access or configuration decisions. And there are artifacts on the device, such as a certificate and tokens, that allow us to make assertions about a device in terms of who is using it, what its unique identifier is, and how authentication was performed. These artifacts and their security are key to enabling capabilities like device and app compliance and protection policies, as well as enabling user niceties like device-wide SSO. And so as a result, we place a really high level of importance on keeping these artifacts secure as they function like credentials associated with a device. Which brings us to Apple's Keychain. Many of you Mac and iPhone users out there are probably familiar with Keychain already, as it has a handful of user-facing features that you might interact with. These are capabilities like saving passwords or credit card information or personal info and so on. And so to tie this into today's discussion, we at Microsoft have historically relied on Apple's Keychain APIs to provide a secure data store for the device identity artifacts I mentioned previously. And it provides strong encryption at rest and gives us APIs that work across devices to do so. And so for many years now, that's been the data store we've used to protect these identity artifacts. However, Keychain has a few properties about how it works that are less than ideal when it comes to storing these artifacts. The biggest of which is that it's not bound to the device, meaning that these artifacts can be exported, backed up, or moved once the keychain's been unlocked. And so because of this, it also means that backups of your devices, if unencrypted, represent a security liability, which of course is not a good thing. And so to mitigate this, we plan to deprecate the use of Keychain to store these artifacts and move to newer, more secure storage mechanisms provided by Apple, which we'll see a bit more about on our next slide. And that brings us to Secure Enclave. So Secure Enclave is a hardware-backed security feature present in Apple's devices that's designed to store and protect sensitive information in a manner that's bound to the device. which ensures that sensitive data and keys can't be exported, tampered with, or backed up. And going a step further, because the Secure Enclave operates independently of the main processor and applications, it's also resistant to a variety of attacks that more conventional wallets and keychains are not, which makes it a great location for us to store sensitive information, encryption keys with a high degree of confidence that the data won't fall into the wrong hands. For folks who want to take a deeper dive and learn more about Secure Enclave and how it works, I've provided here a link in our third bullet off to Apple's documentation, which explores this topic in more detail than we can cover in today's call. And I should mention, as called out here in our final bullet, the security changes that we're discussing today will be opt-in long before they become the defaults for end users, which gives you and your users the ability to kick the tires on these changes and identify issues and gaps well before these changes become the default. We don't have instructions on how to opt in publicly available just yet, but stay tuned, and we'll be providing updated documentation very soon, the link provided here in our last bullet that will instruct you how to enable and get started testing using the Secure Enclave. Okay, so let's briefly pause here and recap what we heard. Secure Enclave provides strong hardware-backed security that gives us a secure environment for storing and managing secrets. And because these secrets can be bound to the device, we can establish a strong security posture in the device for securing its device identity and uniqueness. And using this stronger data store will become the default in the future for Apple devices joined with Microsoft Entra ID. As part of this transition, we'll be removing existing artifacts associated with the device identity from the keychain. And this ensures that no lingering data represents a security risk for your organization. Because we're removing this data from Keychain, we'll need customers to use a new mechanism to gain access to the device identity. And the mechanism is by using our Enterprise SSO plugin, which entered into general availability last year. An overview of our Enterprise SSO plugin is linked here if you want to learn more, and I'll share a bit more about this on an upcoming slide. Okay, so what scenarios and apps might be impacted by this change? Well, the simplest answer is to say that any application which has taken a dependency on accessing workplace join data in Keychain will need to shift away from this dependency. Some common examples might be Google Chrome, where the current SSO and device identity model relies on accessing the workplace join key. You'll see here the screenshot shown on the slide, which may be a familiar UX to some of you. And we know just how critical Chrome support is in the workplace for many organizations. So I'll drop a little teaser here that a new Chrome SSO plugin is coming for Entra ID later this year to support this use case. And we'll see an ETA for that component come up when we look at our timeline. Third-party MDM integrations for this data are also a potential impact. So if you are an MDM provider on our call today or a customer of a third-party MDM provider, you should especially consider opting into these changes early and giving feedback or to us or to your MDM provider. And lastly, you'll see we've called out your scenario here, which is to say there's very likely applications and solutions out there we're unaware of that have taken a dependency on this keychain data. And so we encourage you to get in touch with us, make us aware, which is a great opportunity to highlight, I might add, that the survey that will go out after today's session will have a feedback item for identifying exactly these kinds of cases, and we'd love to hear from you. Okay, so let's talk a bit more detail about our migration plan and what timing might look like. Our plan, and I should caveat that timelines here are tentative, pending the feedback we hear from customers like you, is to make all new Entra ID registrations starting in summer of 2026 and later bound to Apple's Secure Enclave by default. Overall, we expect that the ecosystem of apps will have a smooth transition to this new model. But as I mentioned, apps that have taken a dependency on Keychain will need to adopt an alternative mechanism to continue to support Entra ID's policies, with those mechanisms being explored a bit more in our next slide. Changes to your organization's MDM profile will also be required to enable the SSO plugin, and the docs for that are also linked on our next slide. All right, so let's take a look at those mitigation mechanisms I mentioned. First, if you haven't already done so, you'll want to adopt the Microsoft SSO plugin in your organization. It's available in general availability as of last year, and it provides single sign-on for Microsoft Entra accounts across macOS, iOS, and iPadOS devices with applications that support Apple's Enterprise single sign-on feature. The plugin also provides SSO for older applications that your business might depend on that don't support the latest version of MSOL or our latest identity protocols. So if you haven't deployed it already, I'd highly encourage you to follow the link here in the bullet, as it provides some pretty powerful SSO capabilities. As mentioned, for those applications that have not yet integrated with MSO, admins can add them to the Enterprise SSO plugins allow list, which allows for binding of SSO credentials to network requests from the application. Now, there's an important caveat here I should mention, that is the ability for us to bind those credentials is contingent on the application being integrated with Apple's built-in device networking stack, and not all applications are. So it's important that you test the applications that you add to this allow list to ensure compatibility with this mechanism. For users and admins that use Chrome, we'll have that SSO extension I mentioned earlier coming out later this year, where we'll bring support for SSO and device identity to Chrome on Mac. Number 4 here is a guidance item that we'll want admins to pass along to their users, which is if you use Edge on your Mac devices, make sure to instruct users that they need to be signed in with the browser's user profile to get all the SSO and device identity benefits you expect from your managed devices. And lastly, and this one only applies to those of you who are using non-Intune third-party MDM providers, we'll want to confirm with your MDM provider their support for the upcoming Secure Enclave-based device identity model, and accordingly, which versions of their client need to have installed in your machines to get those capabilities. All right, so we're about wrapped up here on the gist of what's changing. Let's take a look at our timeline, which shows the big milestones behind this effort. So first up here is today, March 6th, where we're announcing our intent to deprecate the use of the keychain for storing device identity. Next up, forecasted for around mid-year in 2024, is the release of our Chrome SSO extension, which will enable the use of device identity and SSO inside of Chrome on the Mac platform, inclusive of those who have elected to opt in for early adoption of the Secure Enclave-backed security. Note here also along the bottom, the period for feedback, comments, and planning, during which we'd love to hear from you so that we can prioritize all the work necessary to ensure a smooth transition for admins and customers as we make this migration. Which brings us to our last milestone here, expected during the summer of 2026, when all new registrations will become hardware backed by default. This sort of represents the finishing line here for us. Okay, so that includes the content that we have for today. As a reminder, an after-call survey will be sent out to the email you used to sign up for today's session. We encourage you to use the survey to share your questions, your concerns, and potential blockers with us. And to leave one last reminder for you here, for those of you who would like to opt into these capabilities early and test, we'll provide new documentation at the provided link in the coming weeks with instructions for how to opt into the Secure Enclave-backed device identity early. Okay, at this point, I'd love to invite our moderator or my fellow co-hosts here to bubble up any questions or themes that came up from our chat, and we'll go from there.
Hey, Brian. So there's a couple that have come up. So the first one that I think we addressed, but it'd be good to reiterate, is this change for Mac devices only, or does this also apply to iOS and iPadOS?
Yeah, I'll take you back here to our preface slide. So this is going to encompass all Apple devices registered and managed with Microsoft Entra ID, which includes Macs and mobile devices like iOS and iPads, or iPhones and iPads.
Okay. So there's another question that came in about the Chrome extension. So will the Chrome extension change, or will the Chrome extension ID change, or can they just push the existing Chrome extension today? So what does it look like? What does the timeline look like for them to be able to push the Chrome extension to their end users?
Yeah, for that one, Olga, if you're still on the call with us here, I'd love to toss that one over to you.
Yes, so the timeline was in Brian's slide, but the ID will not change. It is the same extension that is used for Windows today. The name will change, but the extension itself will stay the same.
Because today, I believe it's called the Windows Accounts extension, correct?
Yeah, so we will rename it to something that's applicable to both platforms, but the underlying identifier in the Chrome extension store will still stay the same.
Okay. I believe Olga, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe if you push it out to your Mac users today, that it won't do anything for them. It's only once it's updated in the future that it will start interacting with the broker.
Correct, and it's actually not the update of the extension that matters, but we will be pushing a new build of the company portals that will include the component in the company portals that lights up that extension to work. So the extension itself, the only update will be the name change, but the actual update that will be coming is inside company portal to light up the scenario end-to-end.
Okay. The next question, since there was a slide that mentioned platform SSO, there's a question on, am I correct in understanding that platform authentication means we can sign in using Entra accounts? Brian or Olga, you want to take that?
I could use some more clarification on this question.
Yeah, so not everyone may be familiar with what platform SSO is. I think on slide 8, there was a mention of the upcoming platform SSO feature that's been announced in a couple blog posts over the last few months. For anybody who, do we want to give just a super high level overview of what platform SSO means here for anybody who's maybe isn't aware?
Yeah,
Sure.
Makes sense. Brian, do you want to take it?
Yeah, sure. So Platform SSO is an upcoming feature enhancement to our existing Enterprise SSO plugin that brings Microsoft Entra ID authentication to your device's login screen, to your device's lock screen. And so what we'll enable here is you'll have a variety of authentication methods using either password synchronization with Entra ID, smart card and YubiKey based sign-in, or passwordless based sign-in that will allow you to sign into your device using your Entra ID credentials. And then once unlocked, that device has device-wide SSO for your applications from that point onwards. And so as a concrete example here for the password synchronization case, this allows you to use your Entra ID password to sign into the local machine. The same principle would apply for something like a smart card or a YubiKey based sign-in. I encourage you to follow the link there too if you want to learn a bit more. We've already made some public announcements for this. Michael or Olga, anything else you want to add in there?
I think you covered it. Brian, this one I think is for you regarding documentation. Will there be any video guides provided by Microsoft on how to set up SSO on macOS? So do you want to talk about some of the upcoming documentation changes that are coming?
Yeah, sure. So we plan to release new documentation to our learn.microsoft.com documentation portal. We'll have tutorials there that discuss how to set this all up, which will include screenshots and step-by-step instructions for all the necessary configuration parameters you need on the back end as an admin, but also a demonstration of what that will look like on the front end for end users as well. Video content will likely come later as part of that, and you'll start to see that content appear on Learn as well. Some limited amount of that may be available as part of our first drop of documentation, but I think just to get folks started here, when we start to release these features, you can expect step-by-step instructions with tutorials and screenshots.
The next question, is any of this based on Apple's device attestation APIs? I don't know if we have an answer to that one or not.
I believe what this referred to Apple attestation is managed device attestation. And no, none of this is based on the managed device attestation right now, because managed device attestation is only available for MDM workflows. And it's not available to, native applications that are trying to use identity. What this is based on is just based on the Secure Enclave that Apple has provided access to for many, many years on both iOS and Mac.
Okay. The next question I think we answered, will there be guidance on preparing an enterprise environment for the upcoming changes? I would definitely recommend that you review the documentation Brian discussed once that's available. I think hopefully that will cover a lot of what an enterprise is going to need to do. The next one is, do we need managed Apple IDs to use SSO?
No.
Perfect. Easy answer. Yeah, you don't need managed Apple IDs. And in fact, regardless of whether you use managed Apple IDs or not, you should be deploying SSO. We think all customers using Entra ID and Apple devices should be deploying SSO. So there's another question about platform SSO. Can we deploy the platform SSO plugin with third-party MDMs? So does anybody want to touch on whether platform SSO will be Intune only, or if we'll have a third-party MDM story?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So once we launch into public preview, at the start, you'll be able to use Platform SSO with Microsoft's first-party MDM offering, Intune. We expect that MDM providers in the third-party space will appear shortly after we enter into public preview. If you have any questions, though, for when your MDM provider will be adding support, or if you want to know that they are, we suggest following up with your MDM provider and asking them for their timeline or what their scope of support is planned to be. We obviously cannot speak for every vendor on the marketplace.
Okay. The next one is, does the shift to Secure Enclave allow admins to force register corporate or supervised devices to enter ID via partner compliance management? Currently, this relies on user authentication and action. And to editorialize a little further on that, I think what this refers to is that we get a lot of requests in forums like the Mac admin Slack channel, where people don't want user interaction in order to do things like device registration. Olga or Brian, do you want to touch on why we require user interactive auth for device registration?
I think Olga may be able to speak of this one.
Okay. Yeah, I can take it. So device registration is a sensitive operation that establishes identity with Entra in our system. And we have a lot of other security features that rely on it, things like device compliance, conditional access policies, and so on. That's why we do require user authentication when we establish those keys. A shift to Secure Enclave doesn't allow us to eliminate that, just because Apple doesn't yet provide any capability for us to attest without the managed device attestation that this request is coming from a particular machine. That capability is still not available from Apple's side, so we'll continue requiring user authentication when we establish those keys, even after we move to Secure Enclave.
Thanks, Olga. Any major changes expected with conditional access related to any of these changes? So, for example, they mentioned that today Mac devices show up as Entra ID registered. In the future, they may show as Entra ID joined.
Yes, so as we shift to Platform SSO, those devices will be considered Entra joined. It doesn't cause any major changes in terms of conditional access, though. The change specifically for Platform SSO will be similar to what we describe here as we move to Secure Enclave. And just to clarify, those two things are basically separate things. Like you can opt into Secure Enclave without opting into Platform SSO. You can opt to Platform SSO when it becomes available, and that actually enables Secure Enclave as well, without having to do anything extra. So there's no major changes other than what we described today in terms of apps supporting SSO extension and so on. Other than that, I'm not aware of any major changes.
Okay. So here's kind of an operational question. So we're not currently managing Macs, and I'm just getting ready to start changing all of our company-owned Macs over to being managed with Apple Business Manager, SSO for managed IDs with Entra and Intune. Should I start the process or request to join an early adopters program and hold off on my changes? So I can take this one. I definitely think you should get started now. There's not really much of a reason to hold off on getting some of these major security improvements and user experience improvements done in your environment. So if you are not managing the Macs with MDM today, get them managed by MDM. Same thing for your iOS devices. Get the SSO extension deployed to them. Use all of the GA features that are available to you today to improve your security and your end user experience. And then some of these future changes that we're working on will become available for you in time, and you'll be in a good position to adopt them. Olga and Brian, anything to add there?
I think we covered it well.
Yep.
Okay. So the next question is, will the Secure Enclave stuff that we discussed here, where we're making some changes to the way that device authentication works, is that going to require Platform SSO, or will it also be enabled for enterprise SSO plugin implementations?
I think I already addressed it before. It will not require Platform SSO. Platform SSO by itself does enable Secure Enclave, but you're not required to use Platform SSO if you just want to use Enterprise SSO plugin with Secure Enclave option.
The next question, and this one I think was addressed in the slides, but I'll just touch on this again, is any impact on enterprise applications such as Zscaler or Outlook or Office 365 installed on macOS? So anything that talks to the broker to get tokens, it will continue to work. So that means all of your Microsoft applications like your Outlook app, your Teams app, your OneDrive app, Edge should continue to work fine. Applications that use Apple's system native frameworks like Safari or applications that leverage Safari web views generally should work fine. But it's third-party applications that do not leverage Apple's native system frameworks and don't leverage Microsoft's Auth libraries where there may be issues. So Chrome is the most prominent example that I'm aware of. And that's why we're building the Chrome extension so that we can get Chrome to talk with the broker. But if you have other vendors that don't play nice with SSO, you'll want to make sure that you vet with those vendors if they're planning to adopt, the appropriate things to support SSO on Apple's platforms. And so one of the things you can do today is deploy the enterprise SSO extension that, again, is in GA, so anybody can feel free to use it. And then make sure that your line of business applications or your third-party applications work nicely with the broker so that your users get SSO, they're not prompted for interactive auth a bunch of times every time they fire up an application, that everything just kind of works seamlessly today. And if that's the case, then you should be pretty well set for the future. Anything to add, Brian or Olga?
Oh, I think you covered it great.
Okay, let me look at the new questions that rolled in while we were talking here and see if there's any we want to address. Are there any examples of management changes or user-facing features that are enabled by the migration to Secure Enclave? I think the answer to that is generally no, but I'll let you confirm.
Yeah, I think the same that we just discussed in terms of identifying any applications that might be impacted and not working with SSO today. That would be the main user-facing impact.
The next one is also Secure Enclave is supported on iPhone 12 and above, I believe. What about lower devices? So do we know if there's Apple devices in use that don't have Secure Enclave? Are they going to stop working once this change rolls out?
Yeah, so I think the main impact are some older Mac minis that might not have Secure Enclave, the before M generation. They will not stop working. They will be using what Apple calls the iOS style keychain on those Mac devices. So it will not be bound to hardware, but it will not stop working.
Okay. Is user interaction required for device registration if Intune is our MDM? So we did cover this one earlier. Olga talked about the device registration requirements. So that goes for all MDMs, including Intune. Here's hopefully an easy one. Will the slides be shared after so we can have a look at the links?
Yes.
Cool. Rochelle, do you know where we're going to be sharing the slides for this so we can make everyone aware?
We'll probably convert to PDF and share with the thank you email.
Okay, thank you. So here's one that I think I can probably add some additional context around. Will the authentication workflow or SSO to Microsoft applications, will it be the same in Europe as it is in the USA and non-EU countries? Actually, there is an additional user approval dialog caused by the DMA. So I think this question is coming from Windows side changes where there's now that new dialog box that users must consent to in order to participate in SSO on Windows. Is there anything like that coming on the Mac or iOS side that users need to be aware of?
Not that I know of right now. However, as regulations change, we might be needing to do something similar. Nothing I'm aware of, but again, I cannot promise it will not come since different countries have different shifting regulations.
What will the migration process from Keychain to Secure Enclave look like? Will it require a user to re-register?
So I can take that one. So it depends on which flow you opt into. If you're opting into our upcoming platform SSO flow, then yes, user will need to re-register and they will be taken through the process. However, outside of the platform SSO, what we are just discussing here, it will apply by default for all new registrations, and existing users will not be required to re-register. However, if you do want your existing users to re-register because to gain access to better security and not wait until they get a new device, then you can do so by removing their devices from the portal. And then once we enable Secure Enclave by default, all the new registrations will use the Secure Enclave. So if you delete their existing devices, they'll be prompted to re-register, and that will use Secure Enclave after the timeline when we start using Secure Enclave by default.
Okay. And this one, again, I think is for you, Rochelle. Is there going to be a recording of this session posted?
Yes, we are planning on it, as long as that's okay with the three of you. It'll be on the AKA link that I shared at the very beginning, aka.ms/Microsoft Entra videos.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, I think that brings us to the end of the questions related to our changes to device auth and Secure Enclave. So Brian and Olga, anything you want to say to close us out?
I want to really thank you all for showing up today and taking interest in the work we're doing. And thank you, Olga. Thank you, Michael and Rochelle, for helping us run the session.
Yes, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. We'll be sending out a recap email within the next business day that will include a link to the PDF version of the slides that were sent out. It will also include a link to a survey, which is a great spot to provide additional feedback on the topic. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. The easiest way to reach us is by emailing entraevents@microsoft.com. Thank you again for attending and have a great day.